Ay, 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 what is going on? Dang it. Never heard of them. You have no idea what you're talking about. So I was 1990. It had been my second year at Western, and I was notorious for cutting class. And as a kid, I grew up without MTV, without ESPN, and Rhonda's apartment had both of them. So it wasn't unusual for me to drive to Macomb, not go to class, and go to Rhonda's apartment while she was at class and watch MTV all morning and then go back home or whatever. Well, one day I remember it would have been in August of 1990, the end of August 27th, actually. I know that, not because it's stuck in my head, but I looked it up, but I know what day it was. I was watching MTV, and Kurt Loder comes on MTV, and they cut in and say that an artist named Stevie Ray Vaughan had died in a helicopter accident. Well, I had heard the name, but I didn't know who Stevie Ray Vaughan was. I had never listened to him before. But I remember laying there on the couch watching this and thinking, that's gotta stink for people who are fans of his. Because they're talking about how he wasn't very old when he died. He was young. And it was, a tragedy. Flew into a ski slope. The helicopter, I think it was really foggy, something like that, because obviously that time of year it wasn't like it was snow or something. And I just remember laying there thinking, that stinks. Like at that age, at the age that I would have been, none of my favorite musicians had died while I was a fan, or athletes for that matter. And so I run out to Rockin' Robins and later that day and buy an album called Texas Flood, and became a fan instantaneously. And so a good friend of mine, Matt Rumler, is a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, and he's sitting in here with me today as we shoot this episode. And we had talked about him coming on my podcast. We were like, well, what could we do? We didn't know if the years thing, the top 10 of a year would work. So I told him one day I was walking home from work, and I'd walk to work one day because my truck was in the shop, and I'm listening to AC/DC on my way to work as I'm walking, which, if you don't know where I live in Mason City, it's about a 25-minute walk from my house to the school. Well, on the way home, I decide I'm listening to AC/DC too. Well, I bring up Spotify on my phone. I start looking through. Well, AC/DC has a playlist called AC/DC 101. They picked the songs that were in AC/DC 101, meaning these are the songs, at least how I took it, these are the songs that you should know from AC/DC. So when Matt and I are talking about what could we end up doing, Matt's sitting here with me right now, I was like, there's no two better people than me and you of my friend group to tell people what would be the best songs. If you've never listened to Stevie Ray Vaughan, what should you listen to? So he jumped at it. He's like, yes, 100%. And not because I have a great idea, not because I'm Mr. Idea guy, but it's good. I mean, we both love this artist. You, because of our age difference, whenever you fell in love with him, and you can get into that. But from that moment on, I started listening to him all the time. And got to a point then in the later 90s where I listened to him over and over and all the time. They did a neat thing on him. It's called Legends on VH1, and it was terrific. And I learned things about him that I didn't know, and we can get into more of that as we go. But Matt, it's good to have you with me. You're a huge SRV fan, just like I am. What's your beginning or memories of him as an artist?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Like you said, as soon as you threw those ideas around about having me on what we could do, and I'm surprised I hadn't thought about this, but I thought maybe it was a little niche. Maybe don't know how many people would know about it, but I liked the idea of hey, if you've never heard him before, what would you listen to? So that was very interesting to me. I'm not sure that I was trying to think back a couple days ago. If I did know of him, it may have been just before the accident. I can't recall. And at August of 1990, I would have been not quite. I would have been 11 going on 12. I definitely had listened to In Step. We'll talk about that album a little bit later. I've wore that album out, heard it 100 times. And we talked about in another podcast about our consumption of music, and I was introduced to him and blues from my grandfather, who lives around the corner from where I grew up, and he's a barber. So a lot of this stuff we'll go back to as we talk about things that take you back to things. There's songs of this. It reminds me of sitting in that barber chair and him cutting my hair and listening, because he had a kind of a surround sound stereo. But really, it was me going down there and him introducing to me. I'm gonna guess, as I can recall, that I heard In Step first, and then I kind of worked my way backwards. And at that time it was, I get a grocery bag and I take all those cassette tapes out of his little holder on the wall and I take them home. Right. So, and I think maybe by the time got way into it, then it was kind of like, oh, he's not alive anymore. And I probably didn't realize that. So that's kind of, I would, as I can recall, that's kind of where my start was with SRV. But, and it was once I got into him, he's the reason I wanted to even pick up a guitar or ask to get a guitar. Yeah. I was just kind of mesmerized by his playing. And I think something that we'll touch on too is something that we didn't have the luxury of. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm going to check this guy out, don't only just listen to him on Spotify. Go to YouTube.
100%.
The way he played, the fire and passion with he played. Yeah. We didn't get to see that. He probably came to Peoria a few times. I never saw him play, but Grandpa had a few VHS tapes of some live stuff. But if you can check out live stuff, this is really what pushes him over the edge as an artist. Just his live playing is just incredible.
Yeah, I am glad you brought that up. If you have Spotify or Apple Music and you go listen to him on those things, that's great. But if you don't go to YouTube and watch some of his live performances, especially the ones later, and on one of the songs that I'm going to mention, if you don't go watch, you've got to, I shouldn't say that, if you've got to go watch it live, and the way he talks, and it'll go with the story I'm going to tell to go with it from his own life. But it's just funny because then I went back and I looked at his discography. Like, Texas Flood came out in 1983. I was 12, but you live in the middle of nowhere like we did. If it wasn't played on, and if you're an avid listener of the Anthony Wherley's podcast, I say this all the time. If it wasn't on YMG, or it wasn't on WWCT, or it wasn't on KZ93,
KZ93, I was going to say, yeah,
which they weren't playing that.
That was pop.
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't have heard him. And if you've played Guitar Hero 1, you've played Texas Flood for a good reason why that's on there. And it is to think that he had an album in 83, which is a really good music year from when I was little. 1984 is my favorite music year ever, and Couldn't Stand the Weather from Stevie Ray. I didn't even know what it was at those times when I was in the middle school. So he has, his story is a great story, and it's it's unfortunate for us as fans that it ended when it did, because I would love to have seen where he was going at the time that he passed.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I often think about. Like, you see around the time that it would, every year when it would be his birthday, and you would think like, wow, what would he be doing at this point in time, or how would have things progressed? Not to get too far into it, but he was a high school dropout. He's got an older brother who at the time was considered to be the Jimmy Vaughan. If anybody knows the Fabulous Thunderbirds, that was Jimmy Vaughan in that band. He was considered to be the hotshot guitar player, not Stevie. Stevie's the little brother. And then he struggled with drugs and alcohol. And that, to me, that was the most unfortunate part was, after 85, 86, when he really had problems, had to be hospitalized, he gets sober, comes back in 89 with a just banger album, and then gets to record an album with his brother in 90, and then the accident happens.
Yeah, when I was saying that, get into his lot, like, he was a mess.
Yeah.
Like, Texas Flood comes out, and then he has severe addiction problems, and it affected his music clearly, which some artists don't really, but his, you could tell it did. And then you mentioned In Step that you ran in the ground, which again came out in 1989, the year I graduated from high school. Yeah. Didn't know what it was. And you can just tell that he's got his life in order in it. I mean, I swear that you can. And that's just what the worst part of it is like, what would he have done that he didn't die because of his addiction. He died because of an accident after he had got it figured out. It's just a shame because he was going to totally believe he was going to just be killing it till this day, for
sure.
years and years and years.
For sure.
So let's get into it. I set the stage for how I figured out who he was. You've told us now how you learned about him. And normally we draft or we pick top tens or whatever. What we're going to do with this one is we're just going to throw out different songs. And we mentioned in one of the other episodes we recorded together, we're going to try to figure out how to put a playlist on Spotify together, or maybe we'll just share it and one of us will post it. But so in case you're not writing these songs down, but we're going to throw out songs. Don't have a set number. We're just going to kind of go, keep an eye on the clock, not run it in the ground. But these are the songs that if you want to learn about Stevie Ray Vaughan, if you even like the blues a little bit, or you love guitar playing, this is what you should listen to. So throw something out at me.
All right. Well, like I said, I would lean heavily on In-Step, but if you're, like we talked about, you see these playlists on Spotify, this is so-and-so. So this would be just like this is SRV. Right. And, I mean, you got to go back to Texas Flood. That's the foundation. And some of these may not be my all-time favorite songs, but they're ones you have to listen to be able to know where he's coming from and where he was at stylistically. So, I mean, I think you got to start with Pride and Joy. That's the one that really broke that barrier of blues into rock, but that one got mainstream and got him, there's things that happened leading up to him be able to record this album, but that one was the one that kind of broke through to where even other blues artists are like, wow, we're getting some notoriety now because the blues is being played on the radio when it wasn't prior.
Well, and those of you, I mean, I can't remember what you would be. We'd have to, if only we had a computer in front of us. But like when MTV started doing Unplugged, he got to be on it, but not like a whole set. But he was on there. It was like an episode, I think, that had multiple people on there. But he plays it on there, and I only remember it because he had some kinds of like chrome guitar. Have you seen this clip?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if you can find it on YouTube now. I haven't looked for a while. But like, that's a big deal. Like, Unplugged became a huge deal, and he was one of the people they picked. And again, at the time when life would have been in order, and plays that. And I'm not sure if he played more than that. It was a weird episode because it wasn't just him. It was multiple different artists. I should have looked this up ahead of time. Someone's listening to this mocking me, and I'll hear about it in a few weeks. But yeah, I'm 100% with you on Pride and Joy. Pride and Joy is a song that if you've not listened to Stevie Ray Vaughan, you've got to give that a listen. And you've heard it on the radio. If you're a radio, you probably have heard it, but it's absolutely I'm going to say this multiple times. It's definitely SRV101. You're looking that up. I'm going to give you one of mine while you're looking that up.
Okay.
He was so revered when he got it figured out. Let me look and make sure I'm right. Maybe I can't check the album's actual release date. No, I can. Let me cross-reference real quick. So his guitar playing got the attention of a guy named David Bowie. You may or may not have heard of David Bowie. Well, one of David Bowie's greatest songs ever, my probably favorite David Bowie song, is a song called Let's Dance. The guitar playing in it, Matt and I just recorded an episode about Eddie Van Halen, and he talked about Eddie Van Halen playing on the song Beat It with Michael Jackson. Well, Stevie Ray Vaughan's version of Beat It would have been Let's Dance with David Bowie. And a song that obviously wasn't to the level of popularity of Beat It, but David Bowie's kind of like maybe there was a lull. That's another podcast, but like David Bowie burst back onto the scene with Let's Dance as an album, and that was the title track. And Stevie Ray Vaughan played the guitar on it, and just kills it. And I didn't know that as a little kid, but when I heard it and realized it in my 20s, I'm like, damn, that was good. This wasn't just a guitar player. This was one of the guitar players.
You hear it now. Again, for me, like Eddie, you hear that now and you immediately know it's him. I didn't know that either. I think I'm sure he's all over that one. I think he is on maybe on China Girl, or what's the other one? Is
Modern
it Cat?
Love.
Is it Cat People? I can't remember the name of that track.
Let me go to the album real quick. There's one called Cat People.
Maybe that one. I can't remember. I think there's 3 I can think of that he was on. But as you were saying, Bowie kind of made a comeback. That was a huge album. And so to have him on it, and actually that was a spot where a little more history was that David had seen him play, I think maybe at Montreux at the Jazz Festival in '82, and kind of wanted him to go along, and it got to a point where I think he wanted to take Stevie out on tour to plug this album, and he decided, I can't leave my bandmates in the dust like this. So Stevie turned him down.
And it was during that period of time too when I think things were starting to go. It was before Texas Flood, because according to, if I'm going by what I'm looking at online, 83 was when Let's Dance came out. 84 is when Couldn't Stand the Weather. So he's in the middle of probably starting to swing life-wise. I guess I'm speculating. But it was in that time period where things started to go sideways for him before, like I said, he got it figured out later in the 80s.
But because of some of those gigs in 82, he got, I believe, as I recall, they had done a gig that had got taped. It got sent to Mick Jagger. Mick has them open at a Stones party. So he's starting to get some notoriety around. That also opened up, I think, from that jazz festival, as I recall. That's where Jackson Browne ends up jamming with those guys. Jackson Browne is the one that says, hey, I got a studio. I'll give you guys 10 tracks. So they take their stuff and they go to Jackson Browne's studio to cut Texas Flood, which is cut, I believe, in 3 days, as I recall. Which, again, if you hear this album, you can tell this is a band that they're out on the road. They probably didn't really have to rehearse much. They'd played this stuff so much, but it's just the feel. It's just amazing, and to think that they cut it that quickly, and it became such a landmark album in his catalog.
Right. So what? Throw me another one.
Okay. I may stick a little bit chronologically with some albums, but if you want to throw stuff around, that's fine. Texas Flood. I mean, that's actually a cover song, an old blues from an artist I think named Larry Davis. It's a cover, but man, again, like you said, kids even up to a few years ago, if you've played Guitar Hero, you know it. And if you're able to watch live versions of this, he'll play behind his back, behind his head, and it's tributes to the thing I always liked about Stevie too. And when I started getting to, not getting on a big tangent, when Grandpa got me into other blues artists, Stevie was definitely a guy that took his influences and melded them all together and made his own thing out of it. Whether that was it, and I'll tell you too, if you like this kind of music, go listen to his influences, which are Albert King, Freddie King, Jimi Hendrix, and Buddy Guy. Listen to those guys, and he took all those guys because he had such reverence for him, and he melded them into one thing and then made it his own. But yeah, Texas Flood is just it's a slow blues, but it just really shows the fireworks he played with, and just it's just a great track.
And that's one thing that I loved about the fact that I fell in love with Stevie Ray Vaughan, is then it led me to those, what you just mentioned. Like I went through a period of time in the late 90s when it was all about the blues, and he was the catalyst of me doing that. So yeah, the people that you named, I'm 100% behind you in terms of, if you've not listened to the blues, go listen to the blues. So I guess I'll go here. Maybe I should save that till last, but I'll say it now. On his album In Step that we talked about, which was when his life got back in order, there's an instrumental towards the end of it That this spring, my daughter got married in May, and you're trying to figure out what are you going to listen to when you do your father-daughter dance. Well, there are two songs that I always think of with my daughter and dancing from when she was little. And one of them was a Christmas song, so you're not going to do that in May. I can remember dancing around with my daughter, listening to Frank Sinatra's, I think it's called The Christmas Song. And when she was little, probably couldn't walk yet. Well, the other one is Stevie Ray Vaughan instrumental, like I said, off Instep, called Riviera Paradise. I would play that song in my truck. I used to farm with my dad when my daughter was a baby, little girl, and I would take her to the farm with me every day. And on the way home from my parents' house, because my mom watched her, I would listen to Riviera Paradise to get her to go to sleep, and it would put her to sleep every time. Not because it's boring, because it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I would play it, and we had talked about dancing to that, be kind of goofy because there's no lyrics and whatever. But to me, I will never listen to it and not think about this, my first child, my baby girl, and it's just perfect. It's a perfect instrumental masterpiece from a legend, and you started shaking your head the minute I said it because you know it's true. It's not because we're fans. It's perfect. And I think it makes it even better that it's at the end of an album when life had gotten better. And maybe it's just waxing poetic that you think that, but like his life was in a good place and he's putting out that stuff. Like things are going really well. It's just that will never not be the song I listened to when my first child needed to take a nap.
That's a good one. Yeah, and that's a great one. And that's a longer song, but like I said, it shows a different style. And the story goes with that one is that they were cutting that at this time. Stuff's not done digitally, it's done on tape. And from what I had read, the producer, they were getting low on tape. They didn't think the take was going to get in, and they just got the end of the song done and the tape cut off, supposedly.
Yeah.
Which is amazing that,
Right.
it's an almost 9-minute song. But
Right.
like you said, it's worth it. It's just, there's a feel to it. I kind of, when you said that, I kind of got a little bit of, this is an artist for me that's like, I can hear this, especially this album, I get goosebumps. Probably like you do. You have artists that you hear and you're just like, oh man, get a little lump in the throat. It's just,
Yeah.
it's just really good stuff.
Yeah, and the podcast we just shot, if you're listening, how whatever order I release them in, this is what music does, and this is why, and maybe you're just listening to this one because you don't care about whatever the other one is. This is why music's so great, because, and you have small kids, my kids are in their 20s, but music ties so much to what you're going through when you're going through it, and that's a good memory of my daughter and needing help getting somebody to take a nap, and Stevie Ray Vaughan made it happen. What do you got?
I love it.
You're next.
Love it. I'm gonna go back. Like I said, maybe some of the early stuff. Right now, I said, unfortunately, the catalog's not large because of he was so successful in such a short period of time before he tragically passed. But I'm gonna kind of bunch two of these together. I'm gonna go back to "Couldn't Stand the Weather," and man, two bangers right out of the get go. "Scuttle Button," which is a short instrumental, and that is, I don't want to say that's Eddie's Eruption, but that's like the one that a guitar players will be like, man, they can play it, but just not the way he could play it.
Right.
But it's just a frenzy coming out. And then you go into "Couldn't Stand the Weather" is just fantastic. That one's a great one. Jimmy's actually playing rhythm guitar on this track, and I alluded to earlier how we weren't able to see live footage of him. Later in life, like for me, it would be either those tapes or, I think you said we didn't have cable either, so it was Austin City Limits on Channel 47, and you would catch him on there. There is a show, look it up on YouTube. After he gets clean and sober, he's playing, and it's got more stuff off of Instep, but "Couldn't Stand the Weather" is one of those I usually post at least once a year, where that band is just, I like to say, cooking with gas. They are on fire. There's a little drum solo, a little bass solo. They've got Reese Winans in the band playing keyboards at this point, and he just comes out shredding. It's just, you have to see it, and this song is just one of those, this is a great album.
100%. Just It's funny, eventually I want to get this to where I have a couple cameras in here, and you could just see, if you could have seen my face when you said that. It's like you're talking crap, like somebody just hit a jump shot. Like I'm just making a mean mugging that song because it's so good, and the video is so like, it makes it look like he's playing in the rain, and he is just killing it. Well, here's my memory for that. When Rolling Stone, and gosh, it's been forever ago, Rolling Stone got to whatever anniversary year. I don't know what it was. It doesn't matter. But like there was a show on TV. So I record it on VHS. And again, I've said this 1 billion times, but I can't do mathematics. But I can tell you about some show that I VHS recorded. And they played a snippet of that in it. And again, that's before we both had supercomputers in front of us and, telephonos beside us that could let us know what it was. And there's this clip of a guy with these goofy looking glasses and a cowboy hat on playing in the rain. And you didn't know what it was. And if you didn't know what it was, you couldn't find what it was. But I remember it was something else. And then later on, you get the internet or you find him and you realize that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it just kills. He just kills it. It's unbelievable. And again, it came out when I was in my 7th, 8th grade year. It came out, Couldn't Stand the Weather came out the same year as Purple Rain. The same year as 1984 that I just ended up drafting 50 songs off of. It came out at that time period and you didn't know what it was. Teenage little, me didn't know what it was. And I was missing out. And if you don't listen to it or give it a chance, I feel like you're missing out too. So that's a great, great, great choice.
Yeah, good call out. I forgot it. Kind of hadn't seen that video in a while, so I just saw a screenshot here. They're all three of them right in a row, and then I think goggles or something, right? He just had on,
it almost looked like some kind of welding glasses or something.
Right, and like I said, the rain and stuff's blowing right in his face.
Yeah.
The bill of his hat's bent down, and
I don't know how great a video it is, but it got my attention.
Right.
And that tiny little clip, because the funny thing was, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's a good blues tangent. At the beginning of this thing, it starts out with a clip of the beginning of Mannish Boy from Muddy Waters. That's how this Rolling Stone thing starts. And if you don't know Mannish Boy, look it up. I've put this on Instagram multiple times. I'm not sure if it's not my favorite song ever. The lyrics, there's never been a more braggadocious blues song than Mannish Boy.
For sure.
When I was born, the nurses all gathered round.
Yeah.
Like, it is it. Well, it was the beginning of that. And there were so many little clips in this Rolling Stone thing, which I don't get the magazine anymore. But at that time, it was great. So anyway, I don't want to go way off tangent because we said we were going to put a time limit, but I don't think we're going to hit it, buddy. We're not going to hit it. People, it's like I said, you don't have to listen to it straight through. If you don't want to listen to it, you can go do something else. After Stevie passed, they put out an album called The Sky is Crying. And it is, I might have failed as a dad in some ways, but the fact that both of my sons love Stevie Ray Vaughan, and when they were home, one of the last times we talked about the album The Sky is Crying. And I'm not going to name the title track, although it's on my list to pick from. How about a song called May I Have a Talk with You? The blues are all about that kind of stuff, and this song just kills it. Do yourself a favor, get on your streaming service, go to the album The Sky is Crying by Stevie Ray Vaughan, and listen to the song May I Have a Talk with You. I wish we could play it. You and I had this conversation of whether we could and whether YouTube would take it down. I don't know. And maybe I need to just try it sometime. But May I Have a Talk with You is just blues and SRV 101.
Yeah, that album is, like I said, unfortunately, that's stuff that had been cut, but we didn't hear it until after his passing. But I'm just gonna go ahead and bounce right off of that because you talked about the title track, and that one I was gonna bring up, and that's another one of those. Man, I can remember being in the barber chair in the garage. And hey, I got got the Stevie tape that, you know, I think Grandpa probably went to Capitol Records or whatever in Canton and would come home and pop that in, and I heard that and was just like jaw on the floor, like,
Yeah, like,
this
what?
is, and I think if you go through Spotify, if you because I bought some of the legacy albums that have the extended cuts and different things, live stuff on it. I think there's a different version. This one is the best one, and it's just wow. It's just, you know, the feel in that song. It's got, you know, keys behind it. It's just that's legit.
Like I was saying, it's like that Mean Mug thing.
Yeah.
Like it comes on and you're just like, what? This is just, you're like, this is good. This is the good stuff. And it really is. Like that, I had it on cassette, or I had it on a CD. And when I fell in love with them and was buying anything I could get my hands on, yeah, it's something else. I've listened to it over and over and over again. It's front to back, beginning to end. It is the album, The Sky's Crying, is great. And again, it kind of hurt your heart because you knew this is what we were missing out on.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
this is where we were going, and sooner or later they're going to run out of this. They're
Yeah,
not, they
for sure.
can give us this, but they're not going to be able to. You know, we're going to run out of it sooner or later.
Again, another reason I kind of resonate with him, when you hear that song and that playing, you feel him saying, "Man, the sky's crying." You know, at the end he says, "Can you see the tears roll down my nose?" Like,
Right.
you feel it.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. It's just disappointing because he was something else. So since we have got streaming, there's an album that, and I don't really know, I've tried to look it up and see, was it his first album? I don't think it was. Spotify has it at the front because of when it says it was released, but it's an album called Solos, Sessions, and Encores. And it says it came out in 1983. I don't know if it did. The first two songs are grayed out. You can't listen to them. And I listened through it. Well, you get to track 6, and track 6 says that it's him and Jeff Beck, who you and I both love. Jeff Beck. We need to do a Jeff Beck 101 one day because people probably don't know who Jeff Beck is. And they have an idea who Jeff Beck is, maybe depending on your level of music knowledge. But Jeff Beck passed away a few years ago and is just unreal. But there's a song on there that's done live. It's called Going Down. Oh my gosh. Every single time it comes on, you can't turn it up loud enough.
Yeah.
I was at work the other day working on student Chromebooks. It was crank. If you'd have walked by my room, you'd have thought they were playing. I had it crank. It's so good. He was so good live. It was just, and that's not like depressing, sad blues. It's like the rockin' stuff. Like it is just so good. Seriously, if you like what we're talking about, go listen to that. Going Down off of Solos, Sessions, and Encores, which according to Spotify, it's the first thing he did. I don't know what. It can't be, some ways, because there's other stuff on it that came after. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
that song.
I would say the only reason I wouldn't think so is because that Going Down's actually a Freddie King tune.
Yeah.
And Jeff and Stevie did tours together, so I'm sure that's where they pulled that from. But yeah, I don't recall if they switched who opened or closed each night, but
Right.
that would have been, I can't even imagine seeing that one live. That would have been
unreal.
unbelievable.
Those two on the same night.
Yeah.
I don't know what you paid for that,
Yeah.
but you got your money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's one that you see a lot of artists. Well, that's kind of a jam solo out song, and I agree with everything you said on that one.
So what do you got?
I'm gonna pull back. I'm kind of, like I said, I'm not going off of a list so much as I'm just looking at albums. I'm gonna get into Instep. Like I said, and this was, again, I didn't have a CD of this till later. It was a cassette, and like we talked about, it was the Walkman, and it was rewind. My kids now, what happens if you had to rewind it? What if you went too far? That's what you had to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it was funny because we were talking, like, to repeat a story, they came out with the technology where it would know like you could hear it. It
Yeah.
would like somehow it knew because there was the gap in between.
Right.
In my garage, I have Rhonda's 8th grade present from graduating from the 8th grade, and you could do that. Like it could know 1 song, 2 songs, 3
wow.
songs, and it was like,
Oh yeah,
Brain
mind
explode
blowing,
technology,
mind
yeah.
blowing. But man, In Step, I've listened to. That's one of those, and I don't want to say I love every song on it, but it's one that I can just put on, let it go. I don't really have to skip anything. The house is rocking. I could take it or leave it, but man, and I don't want to step on you if you're going on any of these, but Crossfire and Tightrope, for me, Tightrope is, again, and you talked about, not only did you feel like he was getting somewhere, he'd got sober, but the lyrics in these tell you that. And, Walking the Tightrope. So that one, man, just another, he's really open, and you're really getting a look into his soul, really, about what he was dealing with. And then he just rips some solos on that one that are just, like I said, that's goosebump stuff for me. It's just phenomenal.
Again, we're both fans, so me agreeing with you is not, sorry, it is what it is. But it was like, I can't think of another artist that I've ever loved that I knew his backstory like I knew Stevie Ray Vaughan's backstory. And I even wrote a paper. I was telling somebody I work with the other day where he was like, "Hey, what are you listening to?" And it was when I was prepping for this. And I was in a contemporary music class at Western when I went back the second time. And you had 2 choices, like for an external grade, for another grade. You either had to go to the professor's room on your own time and play something on the piano, not like not like a Beethoven or nothing, but they would teach you something. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I got 3 little kids. I'm not doing that. Or you could write 2 papers, music based, but those papers had to be great or you flunked it. It was like pass fail on that part of it. And I wrote about him. I wrote about how you could tell from Texas Flood through Soul to Soul that his drug problem and then how it got better. So, I don't know any other artist that I could write a paper on about how their life changed like that of my favorite artists. You're right. In Step, if you were listening to this and you decided to start from the beginning and listen, you would agree with us. You would see what we're talking about. And Crossfire, Tightrope are 2 perfect examples of that. Perfect examples of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I would assume maybe, I'm never really, bothered to look, but I'm assuming In Step maybe has to do with the steps of getting into sobriety. I don't know that for sure, but like I said, those 2 for me. Crossfire is another one. Stranded, caught in the crossfire. Like you could take other interpretations, but it really got into. And then then he just threw some other blues in there. But yeah, for me, Tightrope's. I've got that one right above Crossfire. I love both of them, but Tightrope for me is just, that's another one. You want to get into Stevie, you got to listen to that track.
You have to listen to those 2.
Yeah.
If of all the things we mentioned, those 2 are right up there. So along those lines, and a lot of it, I think that's what I loved him is, a lot of it was life stuff. And at the end of The Sky is Crying, and my friend Chad Frederick and I love this song. We used to talk about this song all the time. The last song on The Sky is Crying is a song called Life by the Drop. It's instrumental, it's acoustic mostly, is what I meant to say. Right? It's acoustic, and I act like I don't know the song. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't misspeaking. But he's talking about life and, living life to the moment, living in the moment. And it's such, like you said, goosebumps. It was almost when you first heard it, you're like, dang it, why in the world do we not get to listen to this genius anymore? It just stinks, And knowing that, Clapton said after the fact that it wasn't supposed to be him on that helicopter.
Right.
He wasn't, Eric Clapton was the one that was supposed to be on there and his guys. And they changed at the last minute. And I'm not saying I want Eric Clapton to have been on there. And that's what I mean. But, it's too bad anybody left that night. Like, hey, just wait another night and, not go. It's not safe to go. And Life by the Drop, I don't know. If you don't listen to any of the songs we picked, listen to that one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And I think, obviously a tragic accident, but, and I don't know how to put this, but if Stevie had a way to go, maybe that's it, because he had just got done playing a show with Clapton, Robert Cray, a bunch of those guys. He's flying to Chicago to jam with Buddy Guy. So,
Right.
unfortunately that happened. Like I said, it's just you see the picture of it and you're going, how did that happen? But, he was going to do what he loved, which was jam with his heroes. And, so, yeah.
And he was getting to the point of how revered he was going to be. Like, you see quotes from Eric Clapton talking about him after he passed. And it's just the same kind of quotes that when you would see when people were talking about Prince when Prince passed away, about just the level of greatness that he had. So,
and I mean, I read too, I think Clapton saying that maybe the only person that he's pulled off of the road, he heard Stevie on the radio and had to be like, who is that? I got to find out who that is. And again, we don't have Shazam to put our phone up and figure it out.
Yeah.
So Clapton says, who is that? I got to pull off and figure out who this is, like, now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and they're not just saying that. Like, they mean it. Like, they're that good.
Yeah.
It's no different than an athlete who appreciates the greatness of another athlete. What do you got with something else?
I'm going to go back to Couldn't Stand the Weather. This is another one I think this is a foundation one. And Stevie's the king of the shuffle. And, man, Cold Shot.
Yeah.
Cold Shot is just... That's another one. It's kind of a humorous video if you've seen the video. But man, that's him. That's primo Stevie Shuffle. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, that album has so many different parts to it, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
And it's really good too. That's what makes the blues and makes the things he was doing is they're not the same. It's not the same song repeated over and over again. And I listened to that album over and over, and that is definitely one of the ones on there that gets your attention. Definitely. For me, I would say get a hold of, well, you have to buy it, but look up The Real Deal Greatest Hits Volume 2. His second greatest hits, well, there's named that. There's a live version of Leave My Girl Alone. And I love that song. When I look at the number of streams on that album, it's not close to the number one. But it's just, he just was so good live. Like, I can't even imagine being at a concert, seeing him live in concert. I don't even know what to say. I do not know what it would have been like to be in the room when he was doing what he was doing. I really don't.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable.
That's a Buddy Guy track. I think, was that on Instep, the recorded version? I think that was on Instep. I could be wrong, but that's another great just slow blues.
The studio version
yeah.
is on Instep.
Yeah, that's another great one. I've heard it lots of times. So it's again, that's more of that catalog we can kind of rehash and say, he plays with feel, and you believe what he's telling you when he's playing and when he's singing it, for sure.
And again, the studio version's great. They're both great. Listen to both of them. You got time. Listen to both of them.
I'm going to bounce back, maybe 2 or 3 more. I don't know where we're at on time, but another thing that I always liked about him, I talked about earlier, the Freddie King and Buddy Guy and Albert King, but he loved Jimi Hendrix, and he talked about Jimmy his brother Jimmy bringing home a Jimi Hendrix album for the first time, and he flipped over it. I felt like sometimes he could take Jimmy things, put his spin on it. Maybe it was better than Jimmy's version. That's subjective. But again, off Couldn't Stand the Weather, another song I used to listen to was Voodoo Child. And he just, again, if this is one you've got to not only listen to this, but you got to watch live, because He just puts heart and soul into it. He's the type of guy, he's sweating by the time he's done, and it's just a high wire act of guitar playing, and he just rips on it.
And I remember Chad and I talking about how it's great because he puts his own spin on it. He doesn't try to be Jimi Hendrix. He tries to honor Jimi Hendrix by the way he plays it. I agree with you. I'm glad one of us needed to mention it. We had to mention it. It had to be on the list because it's so good. So good. And then again, another thing on an album before he even got it figured out, like life-wise, just terrific. So good. I with you 100% on that. And again, it needed to be mentioned. I'm going to do two more. So I'll do one, you do one, and then I'll do the last one. How about Lenny off of Texas Flood? Instrumental. Is it written about his first wife?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Just one of those things. He just had those instrumentals. And again, I mentioned about the one that helped make my daughter take a nap when she was a little girl. And just, he was the king of that too. Like it was that, like, need you to sing, just play me some good music. It was terrific. And whether it was a live version or whether it was that version, it was really good. And obviously, I said first wife, he had remarried when he got things back in order, but so good. I really like that.
Yeah, I love that one too. And that's another one where he took it's Hendrix influenced, right. But not Hendrix, but it's just I don't know how much you can say. It's just beautiful guitar playing. It's it's different than if you heard some of the other stuff, you'd be like, this is a lot different than what he has done. And it's the same with Riviera, and they're great instrumental tracks.
Yeah.
So I'll go one more. I'm going to go, this one is probably not one, although we're doing the, kind of this is Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I'm going to throw a different one in here and this is off Instep, and this is one that I've always liked, and this is not one probably has ever been playing on the radio. It is a track called Wall of Denial.
I knew you were going to pick this one.
Some of it is the guitar tone at the beginning is just kind of growling, but to me, I don't know. It's just got this vibe to it. I just love that track, and it's another one. He's talking about, the wall of denial, like hey, I don't have a problem. I don't have drug problem, alcohol problem, and that. That wall had to be tore down for him to get through his issues and get back in the right direction. So that's one, like I said, it's not one probably even a lot of hardcore Stevie fans may not know it, but that's one I've always liked off of that album. I think it's kind of an underrated track.
Maybe I'm crazy, but I could have swore that maybe I did hear it on the radio recently. And maybe
it could be. I don't know that I've ever heard it, but it's possible.
Right, yeah, I don't... But I mean, I knew you really liked that one. I don't dislike it. It wasn't one of the ones on my list, and when you bring up the fact of what he was lyrically talking, I mean, I can't get past that as a fan, that it just stinks that a guy who, he wasn't one of the ones who ended up in, his life was ended because of his poor choices.
Yeah.
That he did figure it out and then whatever. But yes, no, it's very good. It's definitely in the wheelhouse or in the group of things, in his wheelhouse of just killing it, playing great music.
Okay.
My last one is funny because of all the things I've said since we started doing this. The album Soul to Soul was the one that when he was really kind of when I wrote about him, it was the last album when, at least how I take it, of when his addiction was really getting him. And there's a song on there that you would never believe that he would end up singing it live later after he got his life in order. And it used it to try to talk to the people in the crowd. The song's called Life Without You. If you listen to Life Without You on Soul to Soul, his life is a mess at that time. And then there's later live recordings on YouTube of him talking when he breaks down, like breaks it, like, you know, he's like slowing down playing and not singing the song and talking about taking care of yourself and talking to the crowd about getting their life in order and whatever. So I guess my advice, if you're listening to this, all 15 of you that listen to this, go on YouTube, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Life Without You, and listen to that. And the song is great. It was great when he recorded it when his life was a mess. It's even better when he's using the song to try to get people to not screw up and make poor choices and whatever. And again, I guess I'm half putting words in his mouth, but like, I know from what I saw on the VH1 thing that, you know, that was around the time that he was a mess when that song would have come out. And then I know the dated YouTube things after that, because otherwise he's, you know, he's being disingenuous. But yeah, that song, that had to be on my last one, just because I've watched that on YouTube I don't know how many times.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think that one was actually about, I can't remember if that was a guy that owned a guitar shop that gave him his main Strat, or it was just a friend of his that initially was written about. But you're right, if you got to check out that song on YouTube, because they're long. But yeah, he talks about just, you know, he gets very upfront with the crowd about,
he's really self-reflective.
He's self-reflecting, and then it's just kind of like, hey, we got to be kind to each other, like, you know, just kind of things we were just talking about eating earlier, just like, we got to treat each other better, we got to take care of each other. And you know, like I said, he really came from like I said, he got to a point where he got past those problems, and he's opening his heart up and just kind of saying like, hey, these things are not the answer, but these things can make us all better. And that's a great one, because I didn't have Soul to Soul pulled up, and there's some tracks I like off that album. That's not one I go to as regularly as the other ones, but that's a great call out.
Yeah, it's just funny because that album was the one I wrote about in terms of you go from Soul to Soul to In Step, and life got better, choices got better, the music got better. But it's funny because that's it's kind of weird that like Life by the Drops, the last one on The Sky is Crying, after he had passed away, and they probably did that for a reason, I would assume. I don't know that. But Life Without You is the last one on the album before he got his life in order when In Step came out. Like, that's the last song he recorded prior to figuring it out. And it is an album, when you listen to it, I don't know if it's as good as the others, but boy, that song, and then when you watch it live, like, I'm not joking. You gotta, if you're gonna listen to us and listen to any of the things he does, in my opinion, Life Without You on YouTube, and then go back and listen to the original. So good. Such a great artist.
Just genuine, and I think that's a reason why we both like him. Like I said, we mentioned the struggles, and he just put it out there.
He was honest about it.
Oh yeah, without question, because it was like, you know, I always read things about just as a guitar player, he was just as excited about if Tony Wherley would have came up to him and said, man, you are great, as he would be if B.B. King told him that. But I feel like he would have been the same way when it came to, you know, the drugs and alcohol. If he felt like, if I can reach one person with this message, then it's worth it. Yeah.
That's what I got from when I fell in love with him and started listening to him and trying to consume anything I could get. That's exactly what I thought too. That's a good episode. One thing I wanted to say, and we should get into this some other time. Maybe I should just quit it and not say this, but like, it's just cool that your grandpa, like I've said before on these, that I don't have a lot of musical influences like that. No offense to my parents. My parents are great people, but like, it's cool that you'll always have that. Like your grandpa led you to this legend of an artist. Like that's, I mean, you know, I got some kids coming over, former students coming over in a week or next week. We're going to talk about musical influences, not, you know, like people who influenced your taste.
Right.
It's pretty cool that your grandpa helped you get to this just person that you and I both love dearly. And musically, we can always go back and go, you know, thank goodness we know Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it's because your grandpa did
for
that.
sure.
So,
it is pretty cool. And I've been able to do that with a number of stuff, and And like I said, just like you've got those memories, that's for me. That's, man, I can shut my eyes and be in that barber chair, man, and it's like going back to being 12 to 15 years old. I mean, I still cut my hair up until I was 40 years old,
Right,
but just I can go back to that. It can take you there like that, and that's what's great about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I was thinking that earlier when you were talking about that. I mean, and that's what it's beating the dead horse, but that's what makes music so great, is that it does that. It's a time machine. Music is a damn time machine, and it takes you back. It takes you places that we were saying when we were eating, not that you want to go back and be 13 again, but boy, you had it pretty good. And it's nice that at least music can transport you there, in between your ears and whatever. But so anyway, I just said it. It's a good episode. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, for sure.
Stevie Ray Vaughan 101. If you have not listened to Stevie Ray Vaughan, or you only know some of the songs that we just mentioned, do yourself a favor and listen to those. We'll try to figure out a way to make a playlist maybe before I get it posted. And then you could go on. We'll put the ones that we mentioned on there, and then you could listen and enjoy the greatness that we both have known for a long time.
Yeah. And quickly, from a live standpoint, I would say if you can catch on YouTube Austin City Limits live, and there's a couple different versions. There's like 83, and then there's 89, and then live at El Macombo. Those are must watches from the live side of it.
Yeah.
Catch those, and you're going to get a taste of what he was all about.
Yeah, the Austin City Limits stuff, even if it's not Stevie, other things like other artists
great
on there are really good. That's something that, if you were a person that was fortunate enough to go be in those crowds, you probably left sky high. So, all right. Thanks for sitting down with me, my dear friend Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We will see you soon. Don't forget, life is good. It always is.